Chair, can I just put two questions on those?
Sure.
So you've accepted recommendations 1 to 6, and one of those recommendations is that you improve your value for money.
Yep.
How do you do that retrospectively? So you've gone through a process, you've ended up with a tenderer, you've ended up with a figure, you've accepted these recommendations, and I accept in the future you may do things very much better. How do you apply value for money retrospectively? And I'm happy for you to take that on notice.
I'm happy to try and deal with that question. Yeah. I think the very reason we haven't signed the contract is that we are striving to ensure we do achieve value for money.
Okay, but on that, this is a two-part question. How do you achieve value for money retrospectively? And what about your major silent partner in this exercise? Is anybody on the board prepared to put on the record what Defence's position is in respect to value for money?
Senator, there is no retrospective approach to value for money as you've suggested. What we've moved to is an open book reassessment of all the cost bases and all the return framework.
Okay.
Second, an open book one. Secondly, we have learnt the issues from the US and elsewhere and have gone back and said we want to make sure that the specifications, design and criteria that's in the process actually lines up with Defence and our absolute expectations. That was one of the failings in the US, and they blew out by billions of dollars because what was promised and what they got weren't in alignment. So we've stopped going to contract till we get the definition and design absolutely right and it's absolutely in agreement with Defence and ourselves. Secondly, we've moved to a full open book process for every cost, for every activity, and are going through and assessing those against that design and criteria. So we don't have to go retrospectively back. And the reason for the comment about business case and the rest is until that's concluded and the risks and contingencies, all through those things, are put out in the open and actually mitigated down, that's when we'll get to a final cost and a final risk and a final mitigation. And the reason we're doing that now is not to get into the problems that our overseas colleagues have had, that finding these things blow out later and you come back and explain billions of dollars blow out. So we aren't retrospectively refitting.
Mr. Martin, you're in a last man standing environment here, aren't you?
No, we're far from it, Senator.
Sorry.
We're far from that, Senator.
Well, then you might help me and tell me who the other final competitors are to win this.
Senator, let me...
Because evidence given to this committee before is that there was a short list of 3, 2 are now out, and you've got 1 man left standing, right?
In this process.
You are in a process which you've just described, an open book process, I understand that.
Yep.
But there is only one person going to deliver this project, only one company.
Senator, there's 3 premises to that, and we've all been in that situation because once you get down to a winning provider,
not when you get a bit of neck and neck about it, you don't get to that situation, but...
well, neck and neck requires like for like.
Yes,
and the reality is the evaluation is very clear on the technical and sound framework. But let me deal with your issue because that's a critical issue of negotiating this framework. There are a number of elements to actually finishing this. The open book process provides for transparent and asymmetrical information in the actual management of the risks and the dimensions of it, including some changes that Defence want, etc., which better to do that through this process than get raped and pillaged later. The air navigation market there are only a few suppliers worldwide. The Australian market is one of the first to go to the next block of what are KO standards. That is what we're seeking, is the next block of what the world market is requiring. Whoever wins this actually gets into a situation where worldwide they are seen as being able to provide that next block, which Europe and the rest will have to move to on their next upgrades. So there is a lot of pressure on this supplier to not only win this, but deliver it on quality, price and risk outcomes because nearly every ANS in the world is watching.
So we are, sorry Mr Martin, if I may, Chair. So we are down to one last standing, there's one coming, but we're going to get, hopefully, open, accountable, costings, the whole lot, value for dollars. If it doesn't line up, they can walk away, sharpen the pencil, come back again and have another crack.
three elements to it. This is a world market where, because of our history, we happen to be in the lead for that framework. So there's a lot of pressure on providing the right outcome because it opens up a market for them. Secondly, the Australian market has a few suppliers and they're bidding for other Australian frameworks the rest. I mean, whatever they do here will be observed by other Australian agencies. And lastly, through the open book and tender process, if in the end they aren't able to come to an outcome collectively with us on value and quality, we don't have to sign a contract. We've not signed a contract yet. We're holding back to get all these things lined up and against the risks and against the detailed design so we don't fall into the US and other environment problems. So, Senator, even with one player, we are methodically going through it to keep the right pressure points there, and we still have the option of not to proceed with the provider.
Is there any prospective income arising out of this one sky?
Prospective?
Income? I mean, you're saying that whoever the successful person is, integrating military and civilian airspace, best of the best system, they can market it overseas.
Of course.
Is anything that Air Services gets out of that? Do you get any prospective income as a creation of this, world first?
We're working through those issues with, I won't go into
So you don't know, or
negotiations.
you?
No,
We're trying to find
I'm not gonna-
value
I'm not-
for money,
I'm not gonna go through
public
the negotiating
interest,
rules here.
what's the residual effect on the balance sheet?
Yeah, of course.
So, at the moment it looks like a dog's breakfast. We need it. Everybody knows we need it. We need the best in the world. Simple question, is there going to be any prospective income out of this extraordinary spend of money on world's best practice aviation management?
Again, this is part of finalising the contract with Thales. That negotiation is part of finalising.
So do they get the income? Because that's what I heard over here.
We're still negotiating, Senator, in that respect. Could I just also put in the fact that from a value for money perspective, it is not just about the capital project, albeit that's very, very important, clearly. It is also about the total cost of operating air services. Now, the airline's charges are very much driven by these capital projects, like this one, but also the cost of operating the organisation.
You may not have heard me before. I don't give a rat's about the airlines because they pass it back to the passengers, right?
Sure.
So it's the travelling public who eventually pay.
Correct. And I was
so it's people who go on planes, on and off planes, who eventually pay for this.
Absolutely, and that is why we went through the very extensive process to look at the whole organisation, that we have reduced the cost of the organisation by some $170 million a year,
$177.5 million a year.
because that will come directly off the charges that airlines pay for these services. So a very critical part of value for money is that process as well. And important perhaps to realise, and I'm sure you do, that this project the whole air services operation and this project will be run with no government funding whatsoever. It will be charges to airlines. Indeed, Air Services forecasting under its corporate plan tabled yesterday that it will be paying to the federal government in excess of $50 million a year in taxes and dividends from 2018. So that's really, if we can try and get over the value for money point, we are striving to get the best value for money for both the taxpayer and the travelling public.
And you just need a few good audit reports to get the direction of this committee looking elsewhere. You haven't had them.